We're constantly being told how we should look, what we should want, and, well, what's wrong with the face staring back at us in the mirror. But have you ever just stopped and asked, why? Well, in this explainer, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to pull back the curtain and really deconstruct the powerful forces. We're talking psychological, economic, even the stories we're told that are literally manufacturing the appearance anxiety so many of us feel today.
So picture this. You're just scrolling through your feed one day and bam, suddenly there's this new, kind of bizarre beauty standard popping up everywhere. They're calling it the ant waist. And then, just as you're wrapping your head around that one, it's the A4 waist, a challenge, get this, to be narrower than a single sheet of paper. Or how about comic legs, yet another impossibly slender ideal? I mean, these trends sound completely absurd when you say them out loud, right? And yet, they spread like wildfire across social media, and before you know it, they're defining this incredibly narrow and, for most of us, let's be real, a completely unattainable standard of beauty. So all of this really brings us to a super important question. Where does this constant nagging feeling that we're not good enough come from? Why are so many of us really at war with our own reflections? Okay, so to find the answer, we first have to understand the world we're living in. And honestly, it's like a modern mirror maze, full of confusing and often totally contradictory beauty standards. And this feeling of not measuring up? It is not just in your head. It actually has a name, Rongmao, which translates to appearance anxiety. It's a real, recognized state of distress that comes from that gap, the one between the standard society sets and how we actually see ourselves. And wow, is it widespread. I mean, look at this. Research shows that almost 60% of college students are feeling the weight of this. But here's the really interesting part. This is not just a woman's issue. A higher percentage of men actually reported feeling severe anxiety. This is something that's affecting absolutely everyone. So the question is, how do we navigate this maze without getting totally lost? Well, we can't just passively absorb all these messages coming at us. We need a totally new way of thinking. We need to shift from just passively accepting things to actively investigating them. The book Asking the Right Questions has this fantastic metaphor for this. It asks, are you using sponge thinking, just soaking up all the information around you without questioning it? Or are you using gold panning thinking, actively sifting through all that noise to find what's actually true and valuable? To really get to the bottom of appearance anxiety, we have to become gold panners. And for the rest of this explainer, that is exactly what we are going to do. Think of it like this. We're picking up our gold pan, and we're going to use this critical thinking framework as our official investigative toolkit. So our toolkit gives us a really simple three-step approach. First, we're going to ask, what are the real psychological reasons we feel this way? Second, what are the ambiguous words like beauty that are being used to shape our ideas? And third, and this is the big one, who actually benefits from all of this? All right, toolkit ready? Let's start digging. It's time to uncover the psychological and economic engines that are quite literally designed to create and then profit from our insecurities. So let's tackle that first question. Why do we feel this way? Well, it turns out our minds are kind of wired with a few vulnerabilities. Research points to 3 key triggers that get exploited all the time. First, our deep-seated need to conform, to fit in with the group. Second, the trap of social comparison, especially online, where we're constantly measuring ourselves against these idealized images. And third, something called group unconsciousness, which is basically how easily we can get swept up in a collective goal, like becoming beautiful, without ever really questioning it. Now, these psychological triggers, they don't just exist in a vacuum. Oh no, they are the specific targets of a massive economic machine. It's like the philosopher Jean Baudrillard famously said, in our consumer society, the body itself has become the most beautiful and profitable consumer good, something to be perfected and then sold. And this whole system creates what experts now call the anxiety economy. And it's a pretty simple but powerful formula. First, you manufacture a problem. For instance, marketing anti-early aging treatments to literal teenagers.
Then you sell them the solution, usually through influencers whose helpful advice is really just a disguised ad. It's a system that turns self-worth into a constant and very expensive cycle of buying. But here's the thing, this anxiety economy needs more than just clever ads to really thrive. It needs stories. And when those stories tap into really deep-seated social tensions, well, the results can be a full-blown cultural battleground. Let's look at a recent controversy that blew up in China. At the very heart of it were these supercharged slang terms. On one side, you had lao nu, a pretty nasty term for a woman who is seen as using relationships just for financial gain. And then, on the other side, you had pu xin nan, a viral term used to mock men who are seen as, totally average but way too self-confident. These labels, they're not just insults. They become weapons in this polarizing online gender war. And this whole conflict really came to a head over a viral video game. The debate got so intense that even official state-run media outlets couldn't agree on what was happening. One newspaper accused the game of just cashing in on gender conflict, while another one praised it for building a line of defense for relationship safety. I mean, two completely opposite stories. But if you dig just below that surface-level gender war, you find the game was tapping into something much, much deeper: real-world economic anxieties. Just look at this top-rated comment. It shows that what looked like a war between the sexes on the surface was actually being fueled by the very real, very raw anxiety of just trying to survive financially. Okay, so when we put all of these pieces together, the psychology, the economics, the stories, a really powerful idea starts to take shape. The anxiety we feel when we look in the mirror, it isn't just a personal feeling. It's the final act in a very carefully constructed story. Right. These feelings are not accidental. They are built piece by piece. They start with our own psychological tendencies, then they get amplified by powerful economic interests, and finally, they're cemented into our culture by these super compelling and often conflicting stories. And this, right here, is where it gets kind of unsettling. See, as the author of The Story Paradox points out, our brains aren't really wired to follow facts and logic. We are wired to follow stories. And the most exciting, most emotionally resonant story is the one that wins, often bypassing our rational minds completely. Which leaves us with one last big question to think about. If the reflection you see in the mirror is just the main character in a story that someone else wrote for you, then who is holding the pen?